Watching The Globe on the SABC News channel. A constitutional law expert in the United States says that legal challenges being pursued by the campaign of President Donald Trump to undercut the election result are weak and have a very slim chance of success. Professor Penelope of New York's law school, in conversation with the SABC's Sherwin Bryce-Pease, indicated her belief that it was merely a delay tactic by the president, whilst the legal basis for his claims in various challenges across several states won't stand up to constitutional muster.
Professor Penelope Andrews, as always, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Good morning, Sherwin.
What do you make of the Trump campaign's efforts to overturn Joe Biden's victory through various legal challenges in various states, and the fact that this effort appears now to have the backing of some senior Republican members of that party?
I think that the first thing is that I think it's difficult for President Trump to accept the results of the election. If you recall, he spent a long time in the campaign, the months leading to the campaign, to suggest that the elections were going to be fraudulent. He, for example, attacked mail-in ballots. He attacked the whole system consistently. So I think the first is just him not recognizing it. The second is that I think there's a mistaken belief by him and his supporters that they have a valid legal claim, that they somehow can take questions to the courts, the Supreme Court specifically, and get some of the ballots thrown out. So I think that there's certainly not a legal claim. I think the claims are very, very weak if we go through the court's decisions on many of them. So, for example, many have been thrown out in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Nevada, and so on. So we can see that the claims are flimsy. But I think it's not that there's a legal basis for the challenge. I think that President Trump is weaponizing the court. I think he's using court challenges and these legal claims as a way to fire up his base and as a way to discredit the elections.
Yeah, some people are talking a lot about how this is more a public relations exercise rather than something that he could prevail with in terms of the courts. Let me ask you this. Besides the Bush versus Gore issue, which was a specific case related to ballot counts in certain counties of the state of Florida, that was, of course, eventually decided in Bush's favor by the Supreme Court in 2000. Can you remember, Prof, a time when one nominee, without verifiable evidence, seeks to undermine the victory of another in the instance that we are experiencing right now?
I don't think I can think of another time. There have been recounts. Recounts is a fairly consistent and a usual practice. But that's normally where the margin of victory is so slim, where we're talking about a few hundred votes. So in Florida, we had a situation in which less than 1,000 votes were in play, and it was one state. In this situation, we have 4 states at least that are in play, that are being challenged. So I think that the situation is very, very different. The legal claims that they're bringing in the courts, if you look at what's been thrown out, they're claiming, for example, that dead voters are on the rolls. They're claiming that the counting has been irregular. They're claiming, for example, that late ballots have been included. And all of those claims have been thrown out by the courts. So this is unprecedented. Recounts also only happen in particular circumstances. The state laws that deal with elections state specifically the conditions under which a recount may be held. And normally they have to do with very, very, very small numbers of voters in play. So it's unprecedented. It's a political ploy. The legal bases of the claims that the president is making are just unfounded, and they are spurious.
What are the prospects? I mean, I guess you've kind of answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. What are the prospects, in your view, then, that any of these cases will change the projected results of this election? Because the new narrative we are hearing from Republicans is that the media doesn't decide the election, even though it has been the media that has called these elections for decades, including when President Trump won in 2016. What do you make of that narrative? And is there any prospect of success here?
The narrative is a narrative, of course, it's spin. But I do think that the prospects of success are very, very limited. In fact, I would say they're non-existent. So this is just a narrative that I think the president's people are spinning. And I think the idea is, one of the tactics is delay. So they think that if they can delay this, the electors in each state who are due to count their votes, this has to take place in the next few weeks, and then it goes to Congress. So I think what the president's plan is a delay strategy. So as long as you can gin up the voters, as long as you can create the sense of doubt and the sense that there's been fraud, the courts become, as I said, the courts become the weapon for pursuing these claims. So it's very important to keep this in the front page. The media called the election based on the numbers. The media has been so very cautious. I remember in 2008 when President Obama was elected, the media actually called the election before 11 o'clock, if I recall. The media this time has been very, very cautious. They've basically waited until the last minute when the math clearly were unassailable, and it is clear that the Biden-Harris ticket won.
So let me jump in here. You touched a bit on the Electoral College. We've been explaining this opaque system to our viewers now for months, right? So what happens now that you've got the 270 plus, it becomes down to the electors, like Parliament would gather in Cape Town to elect the president. Here, the Electoral College has to gather in different states to elect the president based on the popular vote. But what we're hearing from some Republicans is that Republican-controlled state legislatures, like you have in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, could simply ignore the popular vote in states in seating their Electoral College electors who elect the president. Is that even possible?
No, it's not possible. The Supreme Court, in fact, it's the faithless electors doctrine. The idea that electors in the various states have free will to just choose the winner. But they have to choose the winner based on the popular vote within the state. I mean, the Electoral College is a particularly vexing feature of American democracy. But the idea is that election law and how you count the votes and the procedures are all state law. So you essentially have 50 different kinds of electoral procedures. But one thing is clear through the Electoral College, that the winner it's a winner takes all. So in this situation, even if there's a Republican administration, the electors have to, through the Electoral College, give the vote to the person who's got the most votes in the state. And so the Electoral College then, so these electors then send the numbers to the Congress. And we know that President Biden is already over the 270 mark. He will probably get 300 or so electoral votes. And then the election will be confirmed, and the transition team can take place, the transition can take place, and certain steps that need to be put in place, which is also part of the American system of governance for the last 200 years. So we have a transition in place so that the president in waiting can start putting in place the things that he needs to do for governance, and so that the system of government is safe, is secure, and there's a secure transition.
Yeah, the sense we're getting is that the transition will happen despite, the lack of coordination from the Trump campaign and certainly from the White House. Let's just ask you a couple more, Prof. Legal challenges are, of course, part of any democratic process, whether in the United States or elsewhere. But I do wonder to what extent it presents a self-inflicted wound on the institution of American democracy that for years has been seen as an example to the rest of the world. I guess what I'm asking you is for you to speak to this moment in America that seems so strange to so many.
It is a strange moment. I mean, I think the United States has been here before. A few things. Everybody projected doom and gloom with the election and chaos and violence. In fact, it was quite an orderly process. It was boring, it took forever, but it was orderly. The second is that the challenges that will happen, if you take your mind back to Bush v. Gore in 2000, the two teams, the legal teams on the Bush side and the Gore side were, preeminent lawyers. So let's look at the Bush team, the Republican team, James Baker, the former Secretary of State, Chief Justice Roberts was on that defense team. So was Kavanaugh and even Amy Coney Barrett, the new justice. We don't see any of this. We see Rudy Giuliani and a couple of people who clearly are incompetent. In the Michigan case, we actually saw the judge scold the lawyer because the evidence produced was so flimsy. I mean, if you're a judge and you get confronted with this, you say, what's the evidence? Show me the irregularities, give me the proof. So I think that, no, I don't think that the American system, I think President Trump and what he's done in the past 4 years has clearly jeopardized the American reputation, and heaven knows what has happened inside the country. But I think that American institutions, for the most part, as quirky as they are, even the Electoral College, they work. So far, they work. Now, the country has never been this polarized. And 70 million people voted for Donald Trump, 74 million for President Biden. So I think that we need to, as a country, and I take you to Dave Chappelle's Saturday Night Live monologue, we need to, as a country, learn to live together. We need to see, as incoming President Biden said, they are not our enemies, they are our opponents. They're American citizens and so on. So I think there's a lot of healing. So that's the unprecedented. Yes, the United States has not behaved well, but the United States has not behaved well for a long time, before Donald Trump, in foreign affairs, in domestic policy, and so on. And this is a country of white supremacy. Let's call it for what it is. But it's also a country that has given you, Martin Luther King and John Lewis and all these wonderful people, Kamala Harris. So I think that, yes, damage has been done, but it's not
irreparable.
Can be salvaged.
It's not irreparable. Couple more for you, Prof. What are the implications if this matter, one of these matters, does reach the Supreme Court and, for the sake of argument, they say Trump is president?
I can't see that. I've been trying to, and talking to other constitutional scholars and election specialists. There's somebody on my faculty who knows a lot about this, and I don't think we can't see it, because remember that you cannot go directly to the United States Supreme Court. And even if it goes to the United States Supreme Court, state law has to be applied. So he has to make his way through the state court system. And I just think, and even when the United States Supreme Court heard this case last week, Justice Alito said the voting continues and gave an order that the mail-in ballots be separated from those in-person ballots. But he didn't stop the election, and I don't see a venue, I can't see a way, a legal way for the president to get to the United States Supreme Court. Because as I said earlier, it's not one state in play. It's 4 states.
Final question for you, and this one's a long one, right? Leave the election challenges behind now. The other aspect of the legal conversation is what happens when, as expected, Trump loses the cloak of the U.S. presidency, which protects him from criminal litigation and the litany of cases he might face once out of office, including the Manhattan DA's probe into the Trump organization, his taxes, the campaign finance violations related to 2016, related to Stormy Daniels' payments and others, the defamation case brought by E. Jean Carroll in New York, who accuses him of sexual assault in the 1990s, and the list goes on. In many ways, the presidency matters more to someone like Donald Trump due to the protections it affords him in that context. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. He loses his executive privilege the minute he's no longer the president. So I think that in that situation, that explains one of the reasons why he's so desperate to stay. One of the reasons. And he will be facing quite a few challenges in court, as you pointed out. The Manhattan DA attorney has a case against him. There's suggestions that he may have been involved in some fraudulent activities. There's the rape case. So I think that when he leaves office, there will be lots of claims, his tax, the question about his tax returns and so on, and whether he's paid taxes. All of those, I think, will visit the ex-president. So yes, so there will be lots of legal challenges leaving. Now, of course, I don't know what happens politically, because the 70 million people who voted for him, do they support him in the way that they have when he's no longer the president? But I think, this is something, I think, certain, that he will be facing legal challenges without the cloak of executive privilege.
Professor Penelope Andrews of New York Law School, as always, thank you for speaking with me and for sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sherwin. You are welcome.